Welcome, folks, to the Squeaky Wheel. With me, as always, is my very good friend, my co-host of the Squeaky Wheel, Lawrence Gervais. I'm Ross, Captain Memphis Pambrin, and we are broadcasting from Calgary in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We'd also like to acknowledge all of the lands of the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Nakota, with whom we share this land and have, on the basis, have a historical and ongoing relationship. Also like to thank our First Nation friends, the Métis settlements, Métis brothers and sisters, and give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth, who provides us the beautiful bounty and for which we get to share. So let's get the fire burning this week, Lawrence. Let's talk Métis. Because before we jump in to too much of our conversation, I noticed you have a beautiful Squeaky Wheel poster there behind you. You've made a few modifications to your room. It looks absolutely delightful. The mustache looks a little grayer since we saw it last week. And can you talk a little bit about what's happening within our region? Because things seem like we're moving slow. This is just the way it is right now.
Well, I mean, we always look at supports for our community, especially around Christmas and what we're going to do for them. And we have a few meetings planned, a business mixer. We have a seniors event that everything is going to be on virtual. Of course, we're not meeting in person yet. And then what we're going to be giving them, so, whether they're grocery cards or whether they're certainly things that will help them along these holidays and these stressful times. So if anybody has any questions about that, they can go to métis3.org or go to our Facebook group and see where the hotline number is. And I think Jason can put that on the screen now if he wants. Jason, do you want to say hi to us? Maybe introduce yourself?
Man, I don't know how to do introductions very well. I feel like everyone already knows me. I'm the guy that does all the editing and whatnot.
Yeah, he's responsible for thousands and thousands of views, right? So all over North America, I presume.
I think we're at somewhere like, is this 23, 24, 23?
23, yeah.
Yeah, it gets a bit confusing when you start considering our Muskrat Tales and some of the other things that we release. But yeah, our Squeaky Wheel, folks, is coming along greatly. Lawrence, I know our guest today is, I'm always excited to talk to him because he brings a new awareness to all of our health conversation. Regan does a great job of sharing the Métis conversation. I always respect her and how she's sharing the information that comes from the province. Our guest today, Dr. Raja Singh, who has quite an awareness of the vaccine, PhD, a lot of research background history. He's going to be bringing in a conversation about the necessity for fast point of care testing, as well as ensuring that hopefully he can share a little bit more insight as to how the vaccine is going to affect us all.
Yeah, but, I just want to make a comment about, how I met Dr. Singh was, on LinkedIn, and he messaged me and wanted to have coffee because he wanted to learn more about the Métis Nation, which I'm always open to do, right? So we sat down, and right away I asked him what he did, and he said he did epigenetic study and genome. He was with Genome Alberta back then. And we talked about intergenerational trauma and how that affects your DNA and your genetic makeup, and how impacts can really affect that for generations. And we got into a lot of the conversation about residential school, and he has a complete understanding of how that is internally within our cells and our bodies to that length to know that the environment will affect us. So he brought a lot of insight to me. I shared a lot to him and said to him that, through the Métis community, we're able to actually know when our First Nation marriages were with our Europeans, right to that exact date. And our diets have changed since. We have a propensity to get more disease in our bodies because of what we eat. Our gut flora is a little bit different. So we talked a lot about that too. And I was always fascinated by the work he did.
Yeah. And his, the nice thing I find for him is he's also able to bring it down at a level where we're not talking as scientific. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity where we have somebody with his knowledge, his background, who can start to share some of that conversation. So Lawrence, unless you have something else you want to throw out, I know he's going to be jumping on shortly.
No, I'm really excited to see, and if he can sort of outline how the vaccine rollout will be and how safe it'll be or effective, like those types of things. I'm really interested to hear.
And normally you and I have a bit of a rant about a current issue, but I want to really share a lot of time with him. So though our rant probably would have been about the vaccine and the Canadian release, let's bring him into the conversation so that he could start to really give us a bit more of awareness to it. So let's take a second here and let's bring in Dr. Raja Singh. Lawrence, here's our opportunity to bring our guest onto the show. Now, we were bringing up the conversation, and this is going to be some of the exciting part of our the Squeaky Wheel today, where we're going to ask those challenging questions that I think we're all been asking ourselves for actually quite a long time. But as the vaccine gets closer and closer at each step of this, what I'm starting to find is there's a little bit of fear, a bit more issues with how are we going to roll it out. And hopefully today, our guest, who I've been talking about already up on our show and talking him up because I like to consider him a friend of ours because he's given us such insight into the conversation around COVID and the awareness of it and the direction, is my friend, Dr. Raja Singh. Now, Raja, before everybody knows a little bit about Lawrence and I, the president, the captain, we talk about ourselves all the time. So we're going to want to get to you, but I also just want to say thank you for coming on the show today. I want to do a big shout out to the agencies in which you've engaged with and have connected us with over a long time. So this is my chance to throw something out. You're currently the scientific director for CardEye. It's the local small medium enterprise developing a COVID diagnostic test. And I know you have a long history from where you've come from. You're an MD, you're a PhD, former director of the Provincial Precision Health Program, and where a lot of our conversation had started was your relationship when it came to research and education within the University of Alberta, University of Calgary, and you're one of the former directors with Genome Alberta. That's a long title to put on the back of a hockey jersey, but congratulations for all the work you've done. Thank you for representing our province. Thank you for representing our universities, our academic groups. We have strong relationships within our academic groups, so thank you for that. So to get to some of the stuff that we want to get to, before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I want to lead into that question a little bit with, especially in our Métis community, we're really connected. We really talk within our community, and the Squeaky Wheel is one of those tools. With your Sikh background, what's happening in your community, but also tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much to you, Ross and Lawrence, for having me on this. And, I've always enjoyed the wonderful conversations that we have had on various topics on how we can take all the research which is happening in our universities outside of the university to help various communities that eventually, as physicians, doctors, researchers, we want to serve. So I think the discussions we have had over the years, especially with the Métis group, mostly through both of you and Lawrence, has been very useful in that context. And I'm humbled to join you both today. Thank you for having me. The Sikh community is quite inclusive in the sense that over the years, the way it has progressed, it has tried to reach out and interact at various levels with all other indigenous groups, minorities, other ethnic groups across Canada, across the world. And in this particular situation where, COVID has sort of tried to restrict us, isolate us, we have tried to maintain the inclusivity and the social connection, trying to be creative. And what we have done is that we have been contributing to various food banks and hunger drives in the past. But now what we have done is that through our two main Sikh temples in the city and large, at a larger level across the province and across the country, we have opened the doors of that to anybody who is in dire need of food, perishable, non-perishable, hot food, whatever that might be. You can literally go in there, drive through, pick up the food, hot meals. If there is somebody who's not able to drive there, we can have that delivered to them. Not only that, through various other Sikh organizations, there were organizations who were struggling with access to PPE. So various other organizations stepped up and they said, we will work on providing you with those type of things. So wherever we could help, I mean, these are just two small examples, but wherever we could contribute to the larger well-being of our community that we have been a part of, we have tried to step up. And the thing is that, we cannot touch everything and everybody, but I think when we try to socialize and connect with other communities and support them and help them bring up the goodness in them, we contribute to the larger well-being of our society. And so that's how we have tried to approach this particular situation, supporting each other, being there socially, morally, ethically for each other, so that we do not feel disconnected. We do not feel isolated and alone in these tough times.
I think you actually you bring up a really good point, and it's something we've had a lot of conversation with here on the Squeaky Wheel. Is that the Métis community? There was, as our culture developed, the acceptance of yourself as a Métis individual. Sure, sometimes there's we have the visual cues. Sometimes dark hair, just there's certain features, just same as in the Sikh community. And it's that growth of acceptance. But actually, a really strong point is there's the personal acceptance that comes within your own community. Then the next step is, and this is something because a lot of the things you said about your community and the temples within the Métis community, we were sharing PPE, we were sharing food, we're sharing all those things. But when you look outside of the connection you have within your community and see the similarities within other, either as classifying as minority groups or different cultural groups, and you see that we're actually, in the end, we all may look a little different, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. And that generosity is what carries us through. So I wanted to ask and lead into some of this because, again, you're thank you for your time as well. The COVID vaccine is slowly making its way around the world. Sputnik 5 was there, the Pfizer group, the Moderna group, everybody's coming up with something. And now the next level of fear is where we're at when it comes to connecting within our communities, within our city, within our province, and now within our nation, the rollouts. Before we talk a little bit about the test that your group was developing, can you take us a little bit through? I think we all have a pretty good familiarity with what COVID is and how it's been affecting our world. What are the fears that we need to have conversation with when it comes to the rolling out of the vaccine? That's one thing, but then our head, what does it mean to take it? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Lawrence, was there anything towards that question you wanted to throw in there?
Well, I mean, the general concern, for us as Métis community members is, what getting a vaccine, what that entails, like safe, is it, how long will it take to, start reactivating our immune system, like all those sort of scientific things that we try to look for when politicians speak, but politicians don't know that sort of verbatim or technical thing, right? So, that's pretty predominantly like, is it? I know we can't say it's 100% safe because it's not, but at the same time, is it effective?
Yeah.
Right. So, before I talk about the vaccine itself, if I could probably just give you like a 10-second pitch on the SARS-CoV-2. And I know we all know quite a lot about it right now, but at the end of the day, what we have to remember is that this is a virus. And like any other virus out there, this will mutate. This particular virus has been mutating a bit slowly compared to other viruses, which has been sort of a good in a sense that, when you're developing therapies, vaccines, you have that window where you can develop something and it will still be effective. But if you are able to isolate yourself and break the transmission cycle of the virus, then you will be able to disrupt the spread of the virus. No question about it. Vaccine or no vaccine, treatment or no treatment. That's one thing. The other thing which you always have to remember is that the best way to deal with these situations is to enhance your personal well-being, your personal immunity, your through exercise, diet, and all those other things. Because if I say that I've got infection now and I can do something to improve my immunity, I cannot. It's an ongoing process which has to start, a few months, a year, or maybe even longer before that happens. So the mental and physical well-being of an individual is critical to that person developing any symptoms for that disease. And in that context, one other thing which is very important is the ability to do testing. How rapidly and how many people are we able to test? Because that tells us who has the infection, even if they're asymptomatic, even if they don't exhibit outward symptoms of the disease. If somebody is carrying the virus in them, they can infect others. So testing is very important. The question around vaccine has been going on for some time. There's over, I would say, a couple of hundred candidates right now which are being developed, tested at various stages. 3 lead candidates are the ones which are from Pfizer, the Oxford vaccine, and the AstraZeneca. And these are the 3 which are in a phase 3 of the clinical trials. Canada, for example, has said that they will be getting the Pfizer vaccine, right? Now, this is subject to Health Canada approving it. We have to remember that. The Prime Minister or anybody else going on record saying we have secured those, we will get them, is subject to Health Canada approving them. Now, something to remember is that FDA was supposed to, the US FDA, which does all the regulation in the United States, they were going to review that on December 10th, but they sort of did that a bit sooner. And this morning, they sent out a news saying that, they are accepting that. So that's a good step in the forward direction, right? Of those 3 candidates, the 3 candidate vaccines that I mentioned to you, all 3 of them have safety and efficacy of about 94 or 95%. So as you were saying that, probably 1 or 2 people did get infected, or even though they were vaccinated, so they did show signs of getting COVID. But then there was a placebo group in which nobody had got the vaccine. And I think people in those placebo groups, they did get the infection. So just to show you that, yes, the infection is out there, but those who got the vaccine, 95% or more were safe. That's as far as the vaccine story is concerned. As far as the rollout is concerned, that is a supply chain issue where you have to understand how many doses of the vaccine you need to develop immunity. Is 1 dose going to be enough for me? Do I need 2? Do I need 3 boosters, right? How frequently those boosters have to be given? And then the other very critical part of this discussion is, in order to maintain that supply chain, you have to maintain the cold chain of the virus, of the vaccine. The cold chain in this particular case, for example, with the Pfizer vaccine, you're looking at a temperature of minus 70 Celsius. That is a temperature which you cannot maintain if you are looking to ship it over long distances. That is going to be a huge struggle for any country, any territory. So I think very briefly, at this point, what Canada, for example, is looking out, that they will put up, I think they said 14 centers across the country where they will start rolling this vaccine out once Health Canada has provided the final approval. And then depending upon, the logistical challenges that they see, they will expand those 14 centers to other centers. And they're going to begin with healthcare workers, frontline workers, workers who are working in old age homes. They will be starting with people who are 80 and above, and they will be starting with indigenous communities. But one thing which you have to remember in that context is that none of those 14 centers are actually located in any of the northern territories. So that's where we are at a very high level as far as the vaccine is concerned.
So I guess a question then is, for the individuals who are concerned about receiving the vaccine, I'm just trying to think. So I apologize. I had this here in my head. We see a rollout of the product, but it seems like a lot of the individuals, can you talk a little bit about why would this vaccine be any different than, say, the flu vaccine? And I think that's a lot of where the fears come from. People think, well, this is the COVID vaccine, but yet you've taken the flu vaccine for many years. Maybe talk a little bit about why that fear might be similar, dissimilar. We've seen historically vaccines take a long time. I think the world at this time worked together, rarely with a lot of sharing, to get this much quicker into our, well, potentially into our muscles, or but if you could talk just a little bit about, and that might help with a little bit of the fear that some people seem to have.
Right. So, at a very basic level, what a vaccine does is that it basically tries to stimulate your own immune system to be prepared for any infectious agent that might affect you. I mean, the commonest that we remember is the tuberculosis vaccine, BCG, right? That's one of the oldest ones that we have known. And then, there were a lot of other vaccines that came along. Somewhere along that route came the flu vaccines. All it does is stimulates your system to produce antibodies or T cells, don't go too much into the technicalities, but so your body can fight the infecting agent, as simple as that. In case of the COVID vaccine that at least Pfizer and I think Moderna are developing, these are mRNA vaccines. So they're slightly different from your traditional vaccines. In a traditional vaccine, what you will do is you will take the virus, you will infect some cells with that virus, and when those cells produce antibodies, you will take those and you will inject them into the individual, or you will take an inactivated virus. In this case, what they have done is they have actually taken the genetic material that is responsible for the production of those antibodies. And instead of putting that virus and that genetic material into a cell, where the cell produces antibodies and then they take it into your body, they are actually putting the genetic material, the mRNA, into your body. So what they have done in the process is that they have circumvented a lot of steps, intervening steps that were involved in the development of the vaccine. And by doing so, they were able to develop this vaccine in a short period of time. Traditionally, you could be looking at 6 months just to develop the antibodies. And how long it will take you to develop the vaccine before that, nobody knows. In this case, they were able to develop the vaccine in a short period of 6 months because they went to the final step, so to say. So they developed or synthesized that particular mRNA, the messenger RNA, which stimulates the production of antibodies in our body. And by making that, they are going to inject that into your body. Now, what that will do is that will actually stimulate the development of the antibodies in your body itself, rather than outside. So when you are developing these antibodies in cells, there might be things developed in the cell, produced in the cell, that your body will react to. In this case, your body is actually becoming the vaccine factory.
Right.
And so the chances of having any of those other things develop in your body are reduced. From the point of view of any side effects that I might be scared of, I think the likelihood of this vaccine showing any side effects is going to be much, much lower compared to some of the other flu virus vaccines or other vaccines which are available on the market right now.
So rather than if we all tried to wait for the years upon years that it would take for the herd immunity, here we're the herd a little bit. We are using the messenger RNA. Oh, no, I think that's going to really help when it comes to that conversation. And just to touch back a little bit on before, because then I'd like to ask you a little bit about your point of care product, the rollout, because as you talk, and that's a very good point about the centers, who do we consider are the greatest threat? Is it the seniors? Is it the healthcare workers? And or do you think that we're not really choosing one above the other? We're going to try to do them at the same time. We see the numbers of anybody under 45 without comorbidities, without having other extenuating circumstances. We see a lot less death, but we do see a lot of people getting sick. So do you think that it seems as though our approach is the right approach? But I appreciate your comments regarding how the vaccine will work. I think that's a great message we'll be sharing with people.
Yeah, I think it's important in that context to understand how the vaccine is produced. I mean, we all can't become scientists, but if we can, if the scientists who are behind that can communicate that effectively, it allays the fears that people have.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think the question that you asked is a loaded question, because how do you decide between your elderly and your frontline healthcare workers, right? Because they're both important.
Yes.
Now, one thing which you have to remember is that elderly and those who might have other chronic disorders, they may have heart diseases, diabetes, or kidney diseases. They are more susceptible to catching infections and developing full-blown symptoms. So even with healthcare workers, I mean, yes, they are at the very front, and they are dealing with people who are infected. So, if you were to, and again, this is a policy decision, but I think if you were to break that down into who amongst those healthcare workers are the healthcare workers that should get the vaccine first, I would put my money on those healthcare workers who are working in ICUs, dealing with COVID-19 patients on a daily basis. And then probably you can have a staggered approach where you can go to other healthcare workers who are seeing patients on a daily basis, or who are seeing elderly people, right? But my priority would be to vaccinate the elderly first. Elderly and the immunocompromised, or those who have any form of chronic disorders, because their immunity is already down. Their ability to fight those infections is very, very low. Their susceptibility is very high.
And I also want to point out, and there's a political correctness. There's a responsible approach. But to our listeners and to the video listeners, folks, you can always try to find something that you want to contest when it comes to somebody who's taken their time to come on. But I appreciate how you also expressed that there's a policy. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made. It would be great to just say we're going to vaccinate every firefighter, but not every firefighter is at work at the time. Not every firefighter is available. Not every firefighter, but also allowing people to get their comfort zone as well. No, I think that's a very important message. And I don't want to challenge anybody here in our conversations with what are all of your personal moral beliefs. No, I think we're all looking out for what we would consider the greater good of everybody. So maybe just could you talk a little bit about, because your agency was developing a fast COVID test. Where are you at with that? Because the tracing is always expressed as one of the most important things. So I'm curious as to where yours is at.
So, this was a startup company that I had worked on establishing a couple of years back. I've been involved in quite a few startup companies because my focus has always been, what can we do to push research results out of the university into tangible outcomes? And so this startup was one of those tangible outcomes that came from some of those good research things happening on campuses. And they had developed a platform technology for heart failure. But once this COVID-19 situation developed, they were able to quickly use that same platform technology for diagnosis of COVID. And so in COVID, you may have heard of two things. One, the antigen-based or antibody-based diagnostic tests, and the second, the PCR-based, which are the more comprehensive, accurate, sensitive ones. So this one is a PCR-based test, but the way it was developed was that we developed it into a hybrid, where instead of having to wait for the results to come, after 90 minutes or 2 hours, we can have results in 30 minutes. And so the development of the diagnostic test was completed last month. We submitted to the US FDA and Health Canada for a fast track approval. And what they have done is that they have allowed us to use this and start offering this test as a lab developed test. And they said, given the exigency of the situation, the sensitivity and the accuracy that your test has shown during clinical validation, you can go ahead and offer this as a lab developed test. We are not able to sell this to other labs who may want to offer this test at this point. But the FDA and Health Canada have promised us that they would do a quick review. And so hopefully, fingers crossed, this week or maximum by next week, we will have the formal approval from FDA and Health Canada to start selling this to third-party labs who might be able to offer this at their own end as well.
I'm excited to hear a little bit more about it. And I know for Lawrence and I, we often have conversations with Regan Bartel, who's our medical director for the Métis Nation. That conversation, these are important steps. And if groups like ours and the Squeaky Wheel bring those conversations forward to say, why are we not looking at new products? Why is our province not looking at new products? Why are we not looking at new ways to facilitate the science behind these kind of lab requirements? Yeah, I know. I think it's great. Unfortunately, we could probably keep you here for hours, but I think you've really helped us understand a little bit more about the vaccine itself. Understand and hopefully you're willing to come back for these as the conversations move. I know you've moved your point of care product from one side and your history of cardiology, moving it towards something like this. Let's hope fingers crossed too, that we don't see too many more pandemics on our way here, that we need as many tests, but hopefully your product continues to develop into different areas. But Lawrence, any other thoughts from the president on our conversation with Dr. Singh here before we let him go?
No, I mean, I want to thank Dr. Raja Singh for coming in today to speak to us and bringing his viewpoint. And I know the political context we always look at, when's the endemic going to happen, number one. And, if it's on the horizon, who knows if it's going to take a year or two. That's sort of what we're going to figure out now. But it's nice to have certainly an answer to a treatment. If we look at ways to possibly test a little quicker, I think that'll help with the infection rate, and then look at where we move from there in terms of where get to the endemic and when that'll happen. And I'm pretty sure the virus will might stay around, just like a lot of the other ones have been here for years, and we just have an answer to people getting sick, and I think that's the most important thing. Yeah, but I want to thank Dr. Raja for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Raja. Now, I'm going to throw this out here, and I apologize when I do this wrong, but to my friend and to the rest of the Sikh community, Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the opportunity to connect with you guys again. Wish you all the best for your program and the work that you're doing for the Métis Nation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Raja. So, Lawrence, I think that's starting to help for our conversation. We have our listeners, we have the people that are sharing the Squeaky Wheel message, and we have thank you to our elders, thank you to our seniors, thank you to the youth. Though the youth see this affecting their lives, they're being thrust into having to be a part of the conversation within their families about the vaccine. Who in their family is going to receive it? Who's going to receive it first? How do we receive it? I think Raja helped explain a little bit about how the process of developing this occurs. This is not the first vaccine that's ever come out, but being aware of the mutation, a bit of the fear that's from behind us accepting receiving the product, the supply chain was very interesting, and his understanding a little bit about that rollout and how we're going to get started. So we're lucky to have somebody who's all of those doctors, nurses who are on the forefront, and the researchers. Thank you to them for the work they're doing. But I guess we have to make sure that we share this conversation within our own community. I know we're doing a great job of firing it out there on our Instagram, Facebook. Folks, when you have questions, continue to send them tsw@métis3.org, because it's the conversations that people have brought to us, and Lawrence and you and I talk about all the time, are what's at the forefront. Well, this is at the forefront. So as we have new things, the new questions that come out, folks, make sure you send them off to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's important, is our contact, our communication with our members, if any, or non-members. If you have a question and you're watching the podcast, and please feel free to message us at any time, and we'll get back to you.
I know we like to, we rant, because our squeaky wheel is meant to be a fun conversation from a Métis perspective. But I know, again, we've had challenging conversations. I think this one has to happen. It has to happen for every group out there. Everybody at some point. The Joe Rogans should be having conversations with people saying, how do we reduce the fear? Again, this isn't the first vaccine anybody's ever received. But this is unprecedented how the world has worked this quickly, this hard together to try and answer something.
So are you saying that Joe Rogan listens to this podcast? Because that would be pretty cool.
If I'm correct, folks, I'm just throwing this out here. I'm 100% accurate that 60% of the time, I always know that Joe Rogan is listening. So if you do the math on that, pretty sure there's a chance that it's all going to work out.
Or he pays somebody to listen to it.
But yeah, folks, Dr. Raja Singh, if you look up genome, if you look up University of Alberta, you've seen his picture here. If you want to get a little bit more information about him and the direction that his organization is going, please feel free to look it up. So Lawrence, it's big thank you. I know you thanked our guest already. I just wanted to get into our review and rant. So our program has developed a little bit. We don't always bring guests on because we want to try and also share about what's happening directly within our community. But when we have our guests on, those are incredibly important. We have our Muskrat Tales that are telling the short vignettes. And big shout out again, always, though he doesn't throw himself in here as often as we either want him to, force him to, or tell him to. But Jason, thank you for the development of the Muskrat Tales and
maybe
the
we
beautiful
can
picture
take this
done.
time, Ross, to Jason to maybe say hi or wave his hand at least. There we go.
Should I do a little curtsy?
Yeah, it's like
there.
Big Brother
Thank
watching,
you, Jason. So
Yeah.
thank you for editing us to make Lawrence look a little better than he is, and for toning me down so that I don't look as tanned as I always am. Review and rant, Lawrence. Driver's aggression. I don't know what it is about the fact that maybe we don't have as much snow on the ground or as ice as we normally do, but God, I'm finding a lot of people out there who are driving like it's the Indy 500, that they are in a hurry. Folks, if the person in front of you is driving you that crazy that they're not driving as fast as you want, maybe think that could be a family member of yours, could be somebody who's new learning to drive. You had to learn to drive once. Racing around them is not going to get you there. Not going to get you there any faster.
Yeah, and watch your lights. I mean, God, we had an accident close to us with Joe Pimlott and one of our presidents in Local 87.
Yeah.
Somebody blew a red light and hit him, right? So, and his totaled his truck. And he's sitting, laying down, I think right now, and probably will for the next week or so. But
yeah, folks, take a little bit of extra time. So, Lawrence, I want to say a big thank you to Raja. I always want to say thank you to you. We do such a great job at the start, but I appreciate your time. Thank you to Jason for editing our show for us every week and for putting a lot of this together. And thank you to all of our listeners. Perhaps close us out, Lawrence, for the Squeaky Wheel this week.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for viewing. Hit subscribe, share with your friends. Yeah, we're very excited for the future. Have more guests and sometimes not, and us getting in person. Now we have a podcast studio. We just can't really go there. So it's
I look
collecting
forward
dust.
to that. We're sitting together where I can lean over and just whack you on the side of the head and say,
No,
well, that was a terrible thought.
That's not safe distancing, Ross.
That's not safe. Okay, at some point we'll get there.
Yeah.
So thank you, folks, from everybody here at Squeaky Wheel. We look forward to you listening to us shortly. And make sure you hit subscribe on the bottom of your YouTube channel. Every subscription really helps us keep this message going.